There are those content to sit and watch their lives go by. Others push the limit. Over 35,000 of them came to stress their bodies, challenge their spirit, and conquer their pain. Step by step, over 26 miles in the greatest city in the world. This is the ING New York City Marathon, the premier event of New York road runners. A true day of magic. A place where the greatest in the world run alongside anyone who thinks they have what it takes, the power to persevere, and the will to win. November 2004. As the first rays of sunlight fell upon the island, the people began to gather. They shook off the sleep and did whatever they had to clear their minds and prepare their bodies. For some, it was donuts. For others, it was dancing. To pass the time, to calm the nerves, to prepare. Small groups of people turned into larger crowds, which then grew into one giant gathering. The village overflowed with competitors, and soon it was time. Up first, people who'd already faced extreme physical challenge in their lives, doing it this time voluntarily. Over 150 wheelchairs and hand cycles. Some came to prove a point, some to stay in shape, others just to see if they could. Up next, the women mixed into the field 45 of the world's top professionals, possibly the strongest New York Marathon female field ever. Names like defending champ and world record holder Margaret Okayo of Kenya, Olympic bronze medalist Dina Castor from the US, Benita Johnson of Australia, but there was one who soon took over. All eyes were on Paula Radcliffe of Great Britain. Everyone looked to her to see what kind of pace she would set, what kind of race she'd run. Radcliffe is considered by many to be the greatest female marathon runner of all time. But she's admired just as much for her work for asthma research. She herself suffers from the condition and overcame. She not only is the leader in the race, she has the admiration and respect of everyone around her.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed?
Then it was time for the men, and what a field of competitors there. Like Africa's top runners, Timothy Cheruiyot, Christopher Cheboibuk, and Paul Kariu. Enos Kibet-Keter of Kenya participated, along with Patrick Tambwe of Congo and Hendrik Ramala of South Africa. These were the runners the rest would need to keep pace with. But take a moment and look at the rest of the field. People of every shape and size, from all walks of life. There is no greater equalizer than a marathon. You're watching as 36,562 people just like you began what was perhaps one of the most difficult yet fulfilling things they'd ever do in their lives. Somewhere out there amongst the masses was a 94-year-old man, the oldest person in the field. Also out there, a group of Iraqi war veterans learning to live with missing limbs.
Make sure you cheer for all the runners as they pass on by.
Go. I know, but just go and go. Just quickly, man. Come on, let's go.
One of the highlights of the run for spectators and competitors alike is crossing the Verrazano Narrows Bridge, a breathtaking piece of architecture. Spectacular to drive over, but so much more amazing to run across, especially lost somewhere in that sea of runners. And all this time later, runners are still streaming across the starting line, a line that just kept coming and seemed like it would never end. Yet, every runner who started the race did so under the watchful eye of New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg. For the women, a pack of 10 leaders seemed to break out ahead of the rest. The pace they set was blistering. It seemed there was no way they'd be able to keep that pace up. No way they could all finish without somebody breaking. Let's check in once again with the leaders who stayed tightly bunched all the way to Upper First Avenue, and that's where Cheruiyot Kibbet Ketter and Ramallah began to separate from the rest. Now you may recognize Cherrigan. He was the winner of the 2004 Boston Marathon, and this is where that group started to open a significant gap on the rest of the field. Many times runners are asked how dangerous it is to run in such a large pack. Well, look what happens here. Right in the middle, and a runner goes down. That's Benoit Z wearing number 7. Fortunately, he was not badly hurt, and with the heart of a marathon runner, he gets right back up, back into the pack, and he carries on. The wheelchair races had finishes that were excruciatingly close. Saul Mendoza of Mexico just could not break away from world record holder Ernst van Dijk and Canadian Kelly Smith. Halfway through now, and the women were still blazing across the course. There were now just 7 runners in the pack, still moving at course record pace. Now, even before the race began, Radcliffe made it clear she had entered to win. On the course, she made it clear she meant every word. As the wheelchair participants made the final turn, all of a sudden Saul Mendoza of Mexico broke away with a sprint that no one could keep up with, and he rolled his way to a win in the marathon. To the women now, and it's still Paula Radcliffe setting the pace way out front. But there isn't any way that Susan Chepkemay is going to let her shake her off the pace. Still, Radcliffe digging deep, keeping it settled, and keeping the pace. If it's possible to read a competitor's face, Paula Radcliffe tells the whole story of how a marathon beats you down, how it's a matter of mind over your physical body, aching, telling you to stop, but refusing to give into it. She's pacing herself well, moving her arms, keeping her feet going, and psyching her competitor out. Susan Chepkemay, not sure if she can keep the pace. These two are racing each other. They're racing alone, and they're racing New York City. What was good for the women seemed good for the men as well. 2 began to separate from the rest of the pack. It was Ramallah and Cherigot making their way to Central Park. Back now to the women. It's Chepkemay and Radcliffe, still amazingly shoulder to shoulder as they entered Central Park, 24 miles in. At the 26-mile mark, the race was still there for the taking. Amazingly, neither woman had been able to break the other. These 2 competitors, shoulder to shoulder for the entire race, neither one about to give in. It looked like Radcliffe was making the push, but no, you can see there Chepkemay sticking with her, even taking the lead for a few moments. But her competitor had more experience, she had more grit, and on this day, she had more determination. Finally, Radcliffe reached down for a deep surge that Chepkemei just could not match. For this year, this event belonged to Radcliffe. She crossed the line in 2 hours, 23 minutes, and 10 seconds, just 4 seconds ahead of Chepkemei, and that was the closest women's finish in the history of the New York City Marathon. It was also the very first time a British runner had come away with a win here in 13 years. Heading into Central Park for the final couple of miles, they were still in a tight group, but with just 1 mile to go, Henrik Ramallah pulled it all together, and this man began to pull away. He led it the rest of the way to the finish, crossing the line in 2 hours, 9 minutes, and 28 seconds. That was the first win in the Big Apple by a South African runner since 1992, and you can see the elation as he comes across the line, blowing kisses to the crowd and waving. Keflezighi crossed the line 23 seconds later to take second. The crowd would have thinned after the elites crossed the line, but no, they stayed for hours just to get a glimpse of this person crossing the finish line. How about that? They hardly look winded after 26 miles. What an athlete. And for the rest of the 35,000 plus people who ran, who pushed their body and soul to meet the incredible challenge of running 26.2 miles, they know they achieved. They know they excelled, and they know they persevered through the 5 boroughs of the greatest city in the world, in one of the greatest races in the world, the ING New York City Marathon.